and welcome to Table Football Monthly Lockdown Special number 3. Thank you to everybody who sent emails and left messages of support on Facebook this last week. I do appreciate it. Now that we're into week 3, I'm beginning to realise why we only did this programme once a month. But onwards and upwards. Now, we have got a packed programme for you today. We've got 2 massive features. I'm not going to tell you what they are. They've involved a lot of research and a lot of work, and I've had some really generous help from Trevor Spencer and Paul Lloyd, so they are both worth watching. We have a new competition for you as well this week, and you wouldn't believe it. You'd have thought the prizes cannot get any better, but they do. This week's prize has been donated by Paul Lloyd of Topspin, and have a look at this. The winner of this week's competition will win these. Oh, I'm going to have to apologise for the rain on the roof. I hope it's not disturbing you as much as it's disturbing me. Now, the prize is fantastic. It's the top 4 place finishers at the 1974 World Cup in Germany. They are hosts Germany, the Netherlands, Poland and Brazil. What a fantastic prize, and they will be finished to the usual immaculate high standards we expect from Paul Lloyd. This is a competition worth entering. Now, on the subject of prizes, we've got to talk about last week's. Now, last week I asked you in the English League, what team, when they're playing away, is also playing at home? Now, in my stupidity, I thought this was quite straightforward. The answer is Home Park, Plymouth Argyle's ground. But Roland Lyons came in with the very first answer, and he came out with St Andrews, stating that because Coventry and Birmingham City share the ground, then when they're away, they're playing at home. Now, strictly speaking, the question was in the English League, and Birmingham City and Coventry met in the FA Cup. But we're mates, aren't we? We've been stuck in lockdown for 3 weeks. Are we really going to get that panicky? So I can hear all of you who said Plymouth thinking, yeah, we are going to get that panicky. But no, I've thrown everybody in the hat because the honest truth is I hadn't thought of the St Andrews option. If I had, I would have really stressed the question slightly differently. So we'll throw you all in this week, which means there's quite a lot of you. Let's get the draw done. Well, here we are. The tension mounts. This is it. The draw to win this rather gorgeous Pegasus 5-a-side AstroTurf edition. Now then, the controversy. As I did last week, I'm going to put on screen a list of all the successful entries in the draw. And all your names are in this tub. There are 77 of you. When you have a look on the list, those on the left-hand column of both sheets of paper are those turncoats who put St Andrews, and on the right-hand side are all the jolly good eggs who put Home Park, which is the answer I was looking for. Not that we want to name names or anything, but so you can see which column you're in. Now, the reason I think we've made the right decision by putting both answers into the draw is that the St Andrews folk came out at 40 correct answers, and the Home Park Plymouth lot came out at 37. So it's pretty much level. So I think we've done the right thing. Now, today's stoppy paper falling out of tub device is a pack of Zugo unpainted spectators, because we do like to improvise. Right, let's give that a really good check. This is a good prize to win. We wouldn't want to mess this up. Right, it's going behind the back in the absence of having Danielle or Smithy to help me. I'm going to have, oh, there's a lot in there. It's like putting your hands through snow. Right, I've got one. This is it. Do I take a sneaky peek or should we look together? The winner is TRACY Wake. Well done, Tracy. We will be in touch. Thanks to everybody for entering. Time to get on. 2 weeks ago in our lockdown edition 1, we featured a Subbuteo accessory that was rather bewildering, and that was the VIP presentation set. Well, this week we've got another, and it's C184, the first aid set. And here it is. As you can see, it consists of 4 pieces. We have our injured player. We've repainted him for reasons that will become apparent at the end of this feature. The original player came in Subbuteo reference 1 red. We have a trainer, we have a kneeling St John's ambulance man, and we have his colleague here ready to unravel his stretcher. Now, as usual with these bewildering accessories, the question is, what were we supposed to do with it? This accessory first appeared in 81-82, which fits in nicely to our lightweight theme this week. Here at a snowy Highfield Road, Coventry are hosting the Saints. Their defender makes a rash challenge and injures himself. His teammates are concerned, as are the bench. Time for the C184 first aid set to save the day. They and the crowd are hushed as the player's injury appears to have changed the colour of his kit. Of course, I am being a bit flippant. It would have been absurd to have expected Waddingtons to have put a colour-coordinated injured player into every individual team box, but maybe equally absurd to only give us 1 injured player in 1 colour. So that is why C184 makes it into our list of bewildering Subbuteo accessories. But it did give me an idea for a feature, because a couple of months ago, when we were talking about Zugo, I got an email saying what a great idea it was that Zugo supplied a spare player in their team set, and what a shame that Subbuteo didn't. And I got to thinking, in 1947, when Peter Adolph launched Subbuteo, neither the FA nor the Football League had sanctioned the use of substitutes, so there was no reason why he would put in more than 10 players. If a player was injured and stretched off in a game, then the team was down to 10. Simple as that. But I started thinking, what damage that rule did to our national game for so many years. And to make my point, I looked at FA Cup finals from 1950 to 1965. And the reason for 1965 is that it was finally for season 1965-1966 that the FA did sanction the use of 1 substitute in a game. And even then, that substitute could only be used if a player was injured. So let's have a look at those FA Cup finals. I know the FA have got a reputation for being a bit slow on the uptake, but this, their competition, the longest running, most respected domestic cup competition in the world, the climax to the end of the English football season, the shop window by which the FA demonstrated their elevated position as creators of the world's greatest game, turned 9 out of 16 of its cup finals into a lottery. In 1952, Newcastle beat Arsenal 1-0, but Arsenal lost Wally Barnes to injury and played with 10 men. In 1953, the famous Matthews Cup final, Bolton were 2 goals ahead, and then Eric Bell pulled a hamstring and should have gone off. He valiantly played on, but Blackpool were able to come back and win 4-3. In 1955, Newcastle beat Man City 3-1, but City lost Jimmy Meadows and played with 10 men. In 1956, we had the famous injury to Bert Troutman, the City goalkeeper, who broke his neck. At the risk, it's got to be said, of losing his life, and he played on to the end to support his team. City won 3-1 against Birmingham. I'm going to pause with that list for a moment, because in 1957, the lack of substitutes probably had a greater effect on our game than any other. And that was the 1957 FA Cup final between Manchester United and Aston Villa. Now this, although we didn't know it at the time, would be the last season that the Busby Babes played together. The following February in 1958 was the Munich disaster, of course, and many of the squad lost their lives. So in this 1957 Cup final, United were playing Villa. They had already won the championship. The team could have become the first club to win the English league and cup double in the 20th century. But they lost their goalkeeper, Ray Wood, after a shoulder barge or a body check, whichever way you look at it, from Aston Villa's Peter McParland, which at the time was absolutely legal. But to lose your goalkeeper in a cup final, the showpiece event of the season, was the work, surely, of fools. The FA, even then, should have thought, we are ruining our showcase event. Let's have a look.
Supervised by referee Mr. Coultus, Johnny Dixon spins the coin and Roger Byrne calls wrong. So Jimmy Taylor kicks off for United and the match of the year begins. Manchester are after that double, but Villa, the last club to bring it off 60 years ago, are out to stop them. Villa on the attack, and the first sensation, Peter McParland shoots straight at Ray Wood, follows up his shot and their heads collide. Both men are down, but it's obvious that the Manchester goalie is knocked out. Jackie Blanchflower puts on a goalie's sweater and Ray Wood is carried off the field. How badly was he hurt? That was the question.
What a great legacy it would have been for that famous side had they been allowed to play that cup final with a goalkeeper or even 11 players. Right, onward and upward. In 1959, Forest beat Luton 2-1. It was Forest who lost the player in this game, Roy Dwight, and they're the only team on our list who managed to lose a player and win the game. The following year, 1960, Wolves beat Blackburn 3-0. Blackburn had Dave Whelan carried off, finished with 10 men. And here is Dave Whelan recovering in hospital after the game. He went on to become chairman of Wigan Athletic. If you look at the headline on the back sports page there, you'll see Stan Cullis, the Wolves manager, declaring no subs rule must go. Did the FA listen? Not a chance. In 1961, the double was finally done, but it was done by Spurs, beating Leicester 2-0 in the final. But any match reports you read from that era will tell you that Leicester were on top, that Tottenham were out of sorts, until Leicester had Len Chalmers stretch it off and played with 10 men. Both Spurs goals in the second half. And then in 1965, Liverpool played Leeds. Jerry Byrne, the Liverpool fullback, broke his collarbone in this challenge.
In control was referee Bill Clements, one of the best in the game. Liverpool kicked off. There were hopes of a vintage final deserving the patronage of the Queen and Duke. Liverpool attacked. Collins dispossessed Hunter and then barged into Byrne. It was a foul, earning Collins a reprimand. It wasn't known at the time, but Byrne's collarbone was injured. For Liverpool, it was a free kick. And
again, for the sake of the team, he carried on. Liverpool did eventually win 2-1. It was after that 1965 cup final that the FA woke up to the fact that their showpiece end-of-season event had been marred 9 games out of 16 and woke up to the fact it was time to allow substitutions. So for the 65-66 season, teams were allowed to use one substitute so long as it was only to replace an injured player. Well, football managers are a long way from daft, and a few of the more wily ones, we won't mention any names but we know who they are, realised that a player could be persuaded to feign an injury so that they could make a tactical substitution. The FA, quick off the mark as always, 2 years later realised this was happening and amended the rule to allow one substitute to be allowed for any reason. Now, as we did 2 weeks ago with the VIP presentation set, we're going to recreate a match. It's the 1961 FA Cup final when Tottenham became the first English side of the 20th century to do the double. But they did so with Leicester City knocked back to 10 players. So let's finally use reference C184, the first aid set, for the purpose for which it was designed. 1961 Spurs v Leicester.
There's a magic all of its own about the cup final, and this time it was a super final. For in this match at Wembley depended the double. Could Spurs become the first team this century to win both league and cup? That was the question in the minds of all the 100,000 in the great stadium as they ended the community singing. Danny Blanchflower, one of the most attractive personalities in the game, introduced Spurs. In charge of the game was referee Jack Kelly, a Lancashire man at his best on a big occasion. McIlmoyle kicked off for Leicester. The great game began. Spurs in white shirts kicking from left to right. The classical style of the champions was soon in evidence. And then, to everyone's dismay, Leicester's right-back Chalmers was on the ground writhing in pain. He was a passenger till late in the game when he went off altogether. Though spirited attacks were made by both teams, neither defence was penetrated. The scoreboard remained blank when the whistle blew for half-time, signal for the Guards band to take possession of the field. The play of both sides livened up considerably after the interval. An anxious moment in the city's penalty area. Suddenly, Bobby Smith seized his chance. Goal! For Spurs, that goal was just what the doctor ordered. Spurs' unrelenting pressure brought reward again. The ball was centred. Dyson headed a great goal. Spurs had won the fabulous double.
I'm not going to go on and on about the evolution of substitutions because these days, with 5,000 players in each dugout, it's hardly worth the effort. But we should, on the subject of substitutes, make one special mention of the one and only original super sub.
And Fairclough is onside. This now could be interesting. Fairclough!
That was, of course, Liverpool's David Fairclough, the original super sub wearing the proper number 12, coming on to score the winning goal against crack French side Saint-Etienne in the European Cup second leg quarter-final in 1977. Liverpool went on to win the trophy that year in Rome, beating Borussia Mönchengladbach 3-1, proving what a wise and sensible decision allowing substitutes was. Smithy and I first started playing Subbuteo when we were 11. That was way back in the early 70s. That was the heyday of the heavyweights. Now we were too young and too poor to build any kind of collection. We may have ended up with about half a dozen teams. And then, like everybody else, we moved on. I get emails every week from all of you saying, "Oh, I wish I'd kept all my old stuff." Well, we didn't, and heaven knows where it all went. But by the mid-70s, we'd found music, we got into punk rock, we got into new wave. We formed a band, and we were lucky enough that kept us going for quite a few years.
Now we're together, let's make up our minds to stay. To tell the truth, never lie, there's no other way.
And then, by public demand, we had to stop. That was by the mid-80s, and we decided to come back to the game. By then, heavyweights had vanished, lightweights had arrived, and we loved them. By now, we'd both earned a few bob, so our collection of lightweights was quite useful. But again, by the 90s, I think it was 89, 90, my children's television business was growing. Smithy was driving trucks all over the continent, so the two of us went our separate ways, and there was a lull until 2017. It was that April I decided to dedicate a warehouse to the collection. Since then, notwithstanding global pandemics, Smithy and I have got together every Saturday morning for 4 hours to enjoy a bit of Subbuteo. Now, those of you who know us will know that we solved the home and away problem by having a stadium each, and Smithy plays his home games on this one. Behind me are the teams we use, primarily heavyweights and topspin. So here we have the Premier League home and away, Championship home and away, lower leagues, international teams, European teams, Scottish and Zugo down here. And we rather enjoy it. When we're not knocking about an 11-a-side, we are prone to a little bit of 5-a-side. This is the dioramaed Subbuteo Football Express table. Now when we're using this, we like to use heavyweights or the flat bottom Zugo players. The one group of players never mentioned are the lightweights, which is really strange as I've kept my whole collection from the 80s and they're here in the studio available for use. I've no idea why they've been ignored. I was swapping emails with Paul Lloyd during the week and he agreed. In his view, about 4.5 years ago, he started to see a resurgence of interest in the lightweights. For me, it's been more recent. Looking at the Facebook collector sites and revival sites in recent months, it's clear that lightweights are making something of a comeback. So I thought it would be great to do a feature on the development of Subbuteo player types with a particular focus on the long lost lightweights. Many of you will know that Subbuteo was launched in 1947 with card and celluloid flats. Now these fragile players were perfectly balanced, lovely to control, even if their standard attention pose wasn't all that attractive to look at. The strapline of Spin to Win was a perfect description. Such lovely control. Very predictable, unlike the 25mm ball. Here in a tight defensive corner, the control of the players can easily be seen. Even when we're tight up against the touchline, you have total confidence. They could bang in a goal too. They were followed in 1961 by a revelation, OO scale 3D plastic figures. These changed the game. It suddenly felt more like the real game on a tabletop. They weren't as well balanced as the flats or as predictable. But here, as you can see, my attack breaks down. You still have the confidence in them to play back and reset. What they lack in finesse, they more than made up for in style. Lovely spin. And these, of course, were hand painted. And quite capable of banging in a shot too. During the 60s, in Subbuteo box sets, we were introduced to two new player types, both of them on moulded bases. This first chap was known as the Walker, and you'll see why now. There we go. He's quite a sturdy fellow. Looks a little bit like your dad has come out for a kickabout. But I had forgotten just how good they are. Just listen to the solid thunk on the ball. Gorgeous. It's almost comforting. I think they look pretty good too. They could spin. Perfect. And here, the forward is put through for a lovely slide and a dink over the advancing keeper. Lovely. The second moulded player type was this chap, a rather awkward looking scarecrow shape. I first saw mine in a Football Express five-a-side team, top middle. But on the pitch, they did everything you'd expect them to do. Maybe not quite the balance of the Walker, but perfectly adequate. Here you can see by the pose of the two red players, not very pretty to look at. Then, in 1966, Charles Staddon designed the iconic heavyweight, and this changed everything. This gorgeous design really added something on the tabletop. There was nothing these players did that their predecessors couldn't, but they just looked better doing it. The boost for Subbuteo globally after the World Cup really helped this team gain its iconic status, supported by some gorgeous box sets that many of us will never forget. The first international tournament in London in 1970, sponsoring the 74 Subbuteo World Cup and winning Toy of the Year in 71. They were finally replaced by the chap on the right, the Zombie, and it looks like Subbuteo's first backward step. When this chap came out in 1977, it was in an effort to create a player that could be machine painted. But ultimately, they ended up with a player that was flat and lifeless. On the pitch, they work perfectly well. They just don't add any atmosphere to the game. But look at these slides. That last shot was especially for John Ellis. He wrote a couple of weeks ago saying how much he enjoyed the shot where the ball was arcing towards camera. Now the poor old Zombie, whichever way you look at it as a player type, it was the first step backward that Subbuteo Sports and Games had endured. The player was lifeless, he was too tall, his head was too small, and ultimately he was flat. Now it was about this time that Trevor Spencer, Mr. Subbuteo, arrived at the company, and he was horrified by the Zombie and put all his attention into developing a new player type that would not only lend itself to being machine painted, but would also bring back the joy for we players. Now I have a batch of my lightweights behind me. There are more on the table next door. We'll have a quick look at my collection and then we'll get on with our story. This is the collection that I have largely had from new when Smithy and I were playing in the 80s. Many of them have still got their old price tags on. I've added a few teams over the years, but not many. And here we have the original lightweight boxes, the Super Team video cassette box, and the Italia 90 World Cup squad. As the name suggests, these new players were lighter than the beloved heavyweight, but they had reintroduced the bended knee stance, and this player type was an altogether nicer 3D player to look at than the Zombie ever was. At the beginning, many were still hand painted, but by the time machine painting was underway fully, we Subbuteo players began to see kits of a quality we could never have dreamed of. I had forgotten just how controllable and how much fun these players are to use. So before we press on, let's have a look at some of these gorgeous kits that came out in the early 80s. Here we have the bright yellow and red colours of Graham Taylor's Watford. They really do stand out on the pitch against Aston Villa in their all claret kit with the blue piping. Here we have Monaco and Scotland's second kit. An unlikely pairing, but I just wanted to demonstrate the colours. It's great seeing just how good they look on the pitch. It's been a fair old while. And here we have Arsenal and East Fife. East Fife hand painted, Arsenal machine painted. And now Chelsea versus Derby. Chelsea's intricate diamond pattern shirts picked up beautifully by the machine painting. Northern Ireland against Peru. And here, the consistency of the Peruvian diagonal red stripe, fantastic to see, and much better, it must be said, than the heavyweight version. And England and Hungary. All the while we're seeing how well the players spin and how well they slide. Here England move out of defence. And within 4 passes they have a break on. And once again, one of my favourite practice routines. 2 passes, a third one into the shooting area, 4 and in. Here we have the early lightweight team box, East Fife, reference 6. Proof of hand painting there, inconsistent sleeves. Then, Stuttgart and Turkey, reference 133. Again, just the inconsistency of hand painting. But by the time machine painting was in full force, the improvement in the kits was astonishing. Reference 639 France, European champions 1984. Gorgeous consistency with the kit. Reference 683 Arsenal. Look at that. Perfect paint job. And finally, Newcastle's away kit with the new one-piece bases. And look at the fantastic logo work. Here's the difference in the 2 lightweight bases. You can see the one-piece base has a much larger flat area. This is the Tottenham away kit, and look at the badge detail. Perfect. A few editions ago, regular viewers will remember we did quite a large feature on the evolution of football shirts from the functional baggy shirts of the 50s right through to the brand-driven logo-laden shirts of today? Well, one of the many things we Subbuteo folk owe Trevor Spencer for is that in around 1984, he approached Manchester United to ask if Subbuteo could recreate their Sharp sponsored football shirt. Now, it is a credit to both parties that Trevor Spencer's charm and determination to get these strips right, and United's flattery and joy at being associated with such a global toy brand led to a deal being done and no money changing hands. And what it meant for us is we got our most accurate football shirt in the history of Subbuteo, and a few more followed. The fabulous A6 Norwich strip, the JVC Arsenal away kit, the United Sharp away kit, the one-piece base, beautifully badged Spurs, Newcastle's away kit, and the detailed Russian national shirt. The iconic heavyweight players ran from 67 through to 77 and are to this day revered by collectors the world over. But the lightweights ran for longer, from 81 to the Hasbro period at the end of the 20th century. From 1.5 million players in the early 70s to over 5 million Subbuteo players by the 90s, the lightweights contributed massively to the Subbuteo story, appearing in some memorable box sets along the way. In 1989, Subbuteo won Toy of the Year for the second time. Here, Trevor Spencer picks up trophies ahead of the Subbuteo World Cup in Rome in 1990. There's so much of football's beautiful past that we will never get back, but for us at the studio, the renewed enthusiasm for Subbuteo Lightweights has been a comeback we're thrilled to share. Well, that just about wraps up our feature on Subbuteo Lightweights. I owe an immense debt of gratitude to Trevor Spencer for the time he freely gave during the week, for the information he supplied, and for allowing me to share some fantastic pictures. Without that help, I'm not sure this feature could have been made. So let's bombard him with thanks on Facebook, and maybe he can be persuaded to help us out again in the future. I also have to say a massive thank you, as always, to Paul Lloyd. And Paul is the man responsible for our competition giveaway this month, so thank you for that. And he's also set the question. So perk up your ears, it's competition time. Please ignore the rain pounding on the roof. It is competition time, and believe it or believe it not, this week we have a magnificent prize once again. This one has been donated by Paul Lloyd of Topspin. Now then, the winner of today's competition will win the top 4 place teams from the 1974 Munich World Cup. They are West Germany, Holland, Poland and Brazil. And they'll be finished, of course, to the usual immaculate high standards we're all used to from Paul. Now, Paul has also set the question. In the 1974 World Cup finals, what player played in a different kit to the rest of his teammates, and why? So we need both parts answered. In the 1974 World Cup finals, which player played in a different kit to the rest of his teammates, and why? Usual rules apply. Try and get your answer in by midday next Friday, and send them please to the usual email address. Don't put them in the comment section below the video, because I will have to delete them and they won't count. We will give you the answer to that next week. Good luck. It's a real cracker, this one. Well, that wraps it up for this week's lockdown special. Again, may I say a very special thank you to Trevor Spencer and to Paul Lloyd. Now, next Saturday, there will be 2 draws in the programme. There'll be the monthly draw to win the Astro Base starter kit, and there'll be the draw to win these 4 fabulous teams from Paul Lloyd. So whatever you do, make sure you tune in for that. Now, with a bit of luck, and if the mail can do its thing this week, a couple of the groovy things I wanted to do for you this week may happen. But we're in the lap of the gods with that. So until then, stay safe, stay in, look after yourselves, and see you next week.
I got the World Cup edition back in 72. Man, I was king of the hill. Those were the days. And the guys over and we played all day. I made the final, but I lost 3-0. And those were the days. Those were the days. Yeah, those were the days. Those were the days. Tired of being a grown-up, wanna throw it away. I said, Smithy, let's set up and play. Danielle came along, she was cool, she was blonde. She said, everything will be okay.